In a peaceful village surrounded by mountains, there lived an elderly monk named Tetsuya. He spent his days in a small temple, surrounded by nature, dedicated to meditation and teaching his disciples. Despite the serenity that always surrounded him, Tetsuya knew that life was full of unexpected moments, and that everything that happened had a purpose, even if it was often not clear right away. One day, a young disciple named Kenji, full of questions about the meaning of life, approached the monk. With a worried face, he said, "Master Tetsuya, I have spent many nights unable to sleep. My mind is full of doubts, and I don't understand why things happen that I cannot control. How can I find peace?" Tetsuya, looking at the mountains rising in the horizon, smiled gently and replied, "Come with me, Kenji. I will show you something important." The young man, eager to learn, followed him without saying a word. Together, they walked along a path surrounded by trees until they reached a small stream. The water flowed serenely, but suddenly a stone blocked the way, creating a small waterfall. The water continued its path, leaping over the stone, without stopping or complaining. Tetsuya crouched down and signaled Kenji to do the same. "Do you see how the water doesn't stop in front of the stone?" asked the elder. "Although the stone is in its path, the water finds a way to move forward without resistance. Nothing happens in vain. Every event is a lesson, even the stones in our way." Kenji looked at the scene in silence, allowing the master's words to sink into his heart. The water, so calm yet so powerful, showed him that the obstacles that seemed to hinder his progress were actually just an opportunity to learn how to flow. Tetsuya, with a deep look, added, "Not everything that happens has an immediate answer. Sometimes what seems like an obstacle is actually the doorway to a new understanding." Kenji nodded slowly, beginning to understand. The next day, the young disciple returned to the temple with a sense of calm he had never experienced before. However, as he was about to sweep the courtyard, a strong wind began to blow fiercely, lifting dust and dry leaves that scattered all over the place. Kenji, feeling a bit of frustration, looked at the sky and murmured, "The wind again. It always interrupts what I try to do." Tetsuya, who had been watching in silence from the temple door, approached and gently said, "Kenji, have you noticed that the wind doesn't ask permission to blow? Just like the wind, the things we can't control come into our lives. Don't fight against them, just observe and learn." The young man, still not fully understanding, sat beside the elder, who looked at him calmly. "Remember what you saw at the stream yesterday?" said Tetsuya. "The water didn't complain about the stones, it just accepted them as part of the path. The wind is the same. If you resist it, you'll only cause more discomfort. But if you accept it, if you let yourself be moved by its force without opposing it, then you'll learn to flow with it." Kenji looked at the wind shaking the branches of the trees, and for the first time, instead of feeling bothered, he felt a gentle acceptance. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The wind seemed to caress his face, and in that moment, he understood that there was no need to fight against what came, but to allow everything that happened to teach him something new. Tetsuya, seeing the change in his disciple, nodded with satisfaction. Nothing happens in vain. Every wind, every stone, every moment in your life has a lesson. You just need to be willing to learn from them. That night, after a peaceful dinner of rice and tea, Kenji retired to his room in the temple. Despite the peace he had begun to feel, his mind remained restless, full of questions. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and soon the shadows began to lengthen as the moon softly shone through the window. At that moment, he remembered a conversation he had had with Tetsuya on his first day as a disciple. The monk had spoken to him about the balance of life and the importance of patience. "Everything comes in its own time," he had said. Nature does not hurry, but everything is accomplished. Over the following days, Kenji tried to practice what his master had taught him. Every time something unexpected happened, instead of resisting or becoming frustrated, he would stop for a moment, take a deep breath, and observe what was happening. However, he still struggled to understand why certain things happened in his life, things that seemed small or trivial but affected his peace. One afternoon, while walking through the temple garden, he found a small lotus flower that had grown at the edge of the pond. It was beautiful, with its white petals glowing in the sun, but what really caught Kenji's attention was the way the flower had grown. In the middle of the mud, in a place where the earth seemed dirty and inhospitable, this perfect flower had emerged. Tetsuya, who had followed Kenji from a distance, approached and smiled at him. "What do you see, Kenji?" The young man observed the flower closely, then looked up at his master and replied, "I see a beautiful flower growing in the mud, where no one would expect something so pure to emerge." Tetsuya nodded, his face calm. "That's right. The lotus flower teaches us that beauty and wisdom often arise from the deepest of our difficulties. Nothing happens in vain, even when something seems dark or worthless. If you look closely, you'll find a hidden lesson, a purpose that is not always immediately visible." Kenji, looking at the flower, felt a part of him begin to understand. Sometimes the difficult circumstances in life were like the mud, and experiences that seemed negative could, in fact, be the seed of a great lesson. The days passed with a serene calm at the temple. Kenji continued practicing what he had learned, but there was always something within him that he still didn't completely understand. One day, while meditating at dawn, something unexpected happened. A small tree branch, fallen during the night, blocked the path to the temple. Kenji, upon seeing the obstacle, felt frustrated again. He had planned his practice so carefully, and now something so simple had stopped him. Instead of accepting the situation calmly, he tried to force the branch aside, but in doing so, he pricked himself with one of the splinters. At the moment when the pain made him let out a sigh of discomfort, Tetsuya appeared, silently observing from the temple door. "What's wrong, Kenji?" asked the master gently. Kenji, a little embarrassed, explained what had happened, showing the fallen branch and how he had felt interrupted by the small obstacle. Tetsuya approached, took the branch in his hands, and said, "Look closely, young disciple. The path will always be filled with small obstacles, some as simple as this branch. But each one, even though it sometimes causes us pain or frustration, is an opportunity to learn how to manage our reaction. The world doesn't change, but the way we respond to it does." The master bent down and gently lifted the branch, showing Kenji how to move it effortlessly, without pain. "What happened was not in vain, Kenji. This small obstacle has taught you a lesson about patience and humility. We don't always need to fight against difficulties. Sometimes, all it takes is to observe and act calmly." Kenji, who had been focused on the momentary pain, began to understand what his master was saying. Physical and emotional pain didn't last forever. What mattered was how he handled it, and how, by accepting the small interruptions, he could learn to see them as opportunities to grow. "Every time something stops you, remember this lesson," continued Tetsuya. "Nothing happens in vain. Every encounter, every difficulty, has something to teach you. All you need to do is be present and open to receive the lesson." Kenji, for the first time, smiled as he understood the profound message hidden in that simple fallen branch. The days continued to flow slowly, and Kenji began to perceive his life at the temple with a new perspective. Every little interruption, every inconvenience, was no longer a burden, but an opportunity to learn. But, like any process, it was neither immediate nor easy. Some lessons required time to be understood, just like when Tetsuya had shown him the lotus flower growing in the mud. One afternoon, Kenji was assigned by the master to clean the temple garden. While gathering fallen leaves, he tripped over a large stone and fell to the ground, scraping his hands. Annoyed by his clumsiness, he quickly got up, but as he looked at the stone, something inside him changed. He looked closely at that rock, so imposing and firm in its place. At that moment, Tetsuya approached from a corner of the garden and watched him silently. Kenji, without saying a word, remained staring at the stone, feeling a mixture of frustration and reflection. "Why are you so still, Kenji?" asked the monk, breaking the silence. "This stone," the young man began, still touching his injured hand. "At first it bothered me, but now I see that, like the lotus flower, it's here for a reason. Maybe the stone has taught me something beyond just being an obstacle in my path." Tetsuya smiled, nodding his head. "Exactly. Nothing happens in vain. Every stone you encounter in your path has a purpose. Some stones teach you to be patient, others to be strong, and others, like this one, teach you to observe. If you take the time to look and reflect, you will see that even moments of discomfort are full of lessons." Kenji sat on the ground, gently touching the stone with his hands. The wind caressed his face as he looked at the solid and firm shape of the rock. He realized that, although the stone was immobile and seemed foreign to the natural flow of the world, its presence in the garden was perfectly aligned with the landscape. Without it, the space would not have been the same. The stone also had its purpose in the cycle of life. Every moment in life, every encounter, every accident or mistake is part of the whole. Nothing happens without reason. Even what seems like an interruption, like this stone in your path, has its purpose in your learning. Tetsuya spoke in a calm but firm voice. Sometimes the obstacle is not something to be avoided, but something to be integrated into our path. Kenji looked at the master, his eyes now filled with understanding. What happens, even if it seems out of place or uncomfortable, is there to help us grow. It's like the water surrounding a rock in the stream, isn't it? It doesn't try to change the rock, but over time, the shape of the water and its flow are what really transform the landscape. Tetsuya nodded with pride. "That's right, Kenji. Everything you encounter in your life, even if it seems to make no sense, is an essential part of your journey. Nothing happens in vain. Every event is a lesson, and every lesson brings you a little closer to understanding and peace." A few days later, a light rain began to fall over the temple. The sound of the drops hitting the wooden roof was soft, almost like a melody. Kenji, who was meditating in his room, opened the window to breathe in the fresh, clean air that the rain brought with it. As he watched the drops fall, his mind returned to Tetsuya's words, "Nothing happens in vain. Every event is a lesson." The rain, although it seemed like a simple event, began to fill him with questions. Why does it rain? Why does the sun shine sometimes, while other times the rain falls, darkening the sky? He realized that he had never had a clear answer to these questions before, but now he felt a calm curiosity to discover the purpose behind each natural event. The next day, as he walked along the soaked path, Tetsuya appeared at his side. There was something in his gaze, as if he knew what Kenji was thinking. "What worries you, young disciple?" he asked softly. Kenji, feeling a little uncertain, explained how he was puzzled by the rain and how, at times in his life, moments of calm and moments of storm seemed to interrupt his natural flow. Tetsuya smiled and led him to a small corner of the garden where, despite the rain, a newly sprouted plant reached up toward the sky. "Look at this plant," the master said. "It grows in the middle of the rain, the wet earth holds it, and yet it does not fight against the storm. The rain nourishes it, The same happens in your life. The moments of difficulty, though they seem gloomy, are the ones that nourish you and make you stronger. Kenji looked at the small plant with more attention. The raindrops falling on it didn't destroy it. They made it grow. That small life seemed to have everything it needed at the precise moment. The rain, which could have been seen as a nuisance to others, was, in fact, what allowed the plant to flourish. So, the rain isn't something we should avoid? Kenji asked, feeling that he was beginning to understand. No, Tetsuya replied calmly. The rain is as important as the sun. Both are part of the same cycle. Just as darkness and light, storm and calm, everything has its place. Nothing happens in vain. In the storm, you find the strength to grow, and in the calm, you find the peace to observe. Both are necessary for balance. Kenji, now silent, absorbed his teacher's words. For the first time, he was able to see the rain not as an interruption, but as a blessing, something that enriched the life of all things. Not just nature, but also himself. The difficulties he had lived through, and those that still awaited him, no longer seemed like insurmountable obstacles. They were the rains that nourished his growth. Tetsuya gave him a gentle pat on the shoulder. Life is never static. Everything flows, changes, and every moment has a reason to be. Just as rain falls to nourish, so too do the difficulties in your life prepare you for what is to come. Nothing happens in vain. Kenji smiled, grateful for the lesson. Time continued its course, and Kenji began to find a deeper peace in his daily life. He had learned to accept obstacles as lessons and to see every experience, no matter how small or great, as an opportunity for growth. As the days passed, however, he realized that there was still something within him he needed to understand more clearly. How could he remain steady in serenity when the challenges were greater and the situations more complex? One morning, as Kenji meditated beneath a tree, he felt a presence near him. He slowly opened his eyes and saw Tetsuya, who sat down beside him without saying a word. The young disciple looked at him and, after a few moments of silence, dared to ask, "Master, I have learned to accept what happens, to find lessons in everything that comes my way. But sometimes, when the challenges are great, I feel lost. I don't know how to stay calm. What should I do when the storm inside me is so strong?" Tetsuya looked up at the sky, which was filling with gray clouds, and then turned his gaze back to Kenji. When the storm rises within you, Kenji, do not fight it. The storm is part of nature, just like calm. What matters is how you position yourself in front of it. Instead of resisting the storm, learn to be like the tree you've sat beside. Its roots sink deep into the earth, but its branches sway with the wind. The tree is not shaken by the storm because it knows its strength lies in its connection to the ground, not in the wind that stirs it. Kenji, thoughtful, looked at the tree near him. Its roots seemed deeply connected to the earth, while its leaves moved gently with the wind. Though the dark clouds gathered on the horizon, the tree remained firm and serene. The storm, like everything in life, will pass, but what remains after the storm is peace. If you learn to be firm in your being, like the tree, and let the difficulties move at their own rhythm, you will not feel dragged by them. Peace is not found in avoiding the storm, but in being able to hold steady within it, without losing your essence. Kenji looked at the tree, understanding that inner storms, though powerful, could not destabilize his peace if he remained rooted in who he truly was. Every difficulty was just another gust of wind in his life, an opportunity to strengthen his roots, to grow deeper. "Nothing happens in vain, Kenji," Tetsuya said, as if reading his thoughts. "Even the strongest storms have their purpose. They teach us to be strong, to trust, to stand firm without clinging to resistance. Every challenge holds a lesson that connects us to something deeper. Kenji closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let calm envelop him. At last, he understood that serenity is not found in the absence of difficulties, but in the ability to remain grounded and centered in spite of them. The wind blew, the clouds moved, but he no longer felt afraid. He knew that everything, even the storm, was part of the natural flow of life. Tetsuya looked at him, satisfied with his disciple's understanding. Remember, Kenji, that nothing happens in vain. Every event, every moment has something to teach us. We only need to be attentive to see what it wants to show us. The young disciple nodded, with a peaceful heart and a clear mind. From that day on, Kenji lived each moment with a renewed calm. He no longer sought quick answers or rushed to find meaning in things. He understood that every event had its purpose, and that wisdom was not always found in explanation, but in the experience itself. When a challenge arrived, he faced it with an open mind, ready to learn from it. When calm came, he immersed himself in it with gratitude, knowing that everything was part of a perfect cycle. Over time, his life became a fluid dance between action and reflection, between wind and stillness. And with every step he took, in every moment he lived, he found more and more peace, knowing that within each one was a teaching guiding him toward his truth. And so, Kenji learned that nothing in life happens by accident, that everything, absolutely everything, has a purpose. Because ultimately, everything is part of a greater path, a path that can only be understood when we stop fighting against it and begin to walk with it.